and welcome to What is New with R2 2021 with KendoUI. So I'm joined by Alyssa Nykel and TJ Van Tol. So hello to the two of them. And if I look over to my left a little bit, it's just to make sure that everything's honky-dory and a-okay with the stream. So apologies as I'm looking over to my second screen. But we do have a ton of features to cover today, and that includes things in jQuery, Angular, React, and Vue. So we do see a lot of people trickling in still, but I'm going to go ahead and get started since we do have some housekeeping items to chat about first. So first of all, everything that we're covering today is available on our website, so you can jump on over to the What's New page of KendoUI, which is as easy as just going to Google and typing in KendoUI What's New, or of course going to Telerik.com or KendoUI.com and checking that out. Sorry if you use another search engine, but you can probably find it through that approach as well. So we do have a ton of updates across all these frameworks, so let's continue on here. And this is a question that always gets brought up, and I'm going to mention it here in the beginning. Everything that we're doing today is being recorded. So if you miss a part, or if you're not able to join, from the beginning, which I guess you might miss this portion, but it will be recorded. So you can jump back onto YouTube and check it out if you'd like to. And that's going to be found at youtube.com/KendoUITV. Or if you're like me, you just type in KendoUI into the search bar of YouTube and you'll find it there as well. Now, we have a full host of folks that are ready to answer any and all questions. So you might see in the GoToWebinar interface, you have a little chat box. That goes directly to our Q&A box. And from there, a lot of people behind the scenes are going to be answering questions. But if you want to, you can also grab us on Twitter with hashtag #HeyKendoUI, and we will try to pick up some questions there and answer them there as well, of course. We might not get to them all during the webinar, but of course, if we don't, we'll follow up and try to address them as soon as we can. Now, some of you might have already joined us here, but we are actively on Twitch. And when I say we, it's mostly Alyssa, TJ, and other folks in our DevRel group that are streaming constantly. So head on over to twitch.tv/codeit live and check out the schedule. We cover everything from web development to desktop development to mobile development. There's too many things going on. We even have some casual streams as well. So there's a ton of interactivity happening here as well. So I recommend.
And we've started a VR development stream. So it's like we're all over the place.
Next level.
Yeah.
But they do the VR with a camera that you can see them with the things in their head too. It's pretty entertaining.
Yeah, that's one of my fears, that somebody's going to record me whenever I'm playing a VR game. So that's it's great to know that the fear is actively happening on our live stream. Now, to just cover some highlights, and I'm not going to go through all of these, I just want to give everybody an idea of what this looks like. You can see here that we have a ton of new components and a ton of new features available in each and every one of the suites that we offer. And to bring everybody kind of on the same page, each one of these are built from the ground up for that specific technology. So that's why you might see some similar components here and there and some different components here and there, right? Because we are just addressing some feedback that we get, of course, from all of our customers to ensure that we can deliver components and features that they need. And that's why you can kind of see some differences here and there. But overall, right, between Angular, React, jQuery, and Vue, there's a ton of features. So we're going to go ahead and dive into this a little bit deeper within each section. Now, to give you an idea of what that looks like in terms of agenda for today, we're going to kick things off after I'm done here with KendoUI for Angular. Then we're going to cover KendoReact, and then it's the jQuery and the Vue components that we'll be taking a look at. So this is all in Eastern Standard Time. So if you are somewhere else in the world, just think about the Angular section starting in the beginning, and then we'll kind of add on, essentially 40-minute increments from there. But with that being said, I'm going to go ahead and kick things off to Alyssa, and she'll be able to take us through what is new in KendoUI for Angular with R2 2021.
All right, let's see how flawlessly I can present my screen. Here we go. Show my main screen. You all should maybe be able to see the slide at this point in our lives.
Yeah, that was smooth. You got it.
That was smooth. Welcome to the KendoUI for Angular portion of our R2 release webinar. I'm so So glad to be here with you. As Carl said, my name is Alyssa Nykel. So yes, let's just hop right into the goods. At Alyssa Nykel on Twitter, and my DM is always open. So if you think of something Angular related, front end related, just have a really good dad joke, I don't know, my DM is always open. But at KendoUI or the hashtag HeyKendoUI to get our attention with questions and other goodies. So yeah. So I wanted to give a shout out. So if you're watching this, you're probably maybe hopefully interested in Angular things. So I've got a couple of Angular related items to shout out. I do 2 podcasts every week on Angular Air, and then we do a Devs and Dragons podcast where we play like virtual board games and we interview devs in the community. And so it's a lot of fun. Check those out. And then as Carl said, all of the Code It live streams. So I do a UI Friday show on Fridays, and then VR Into the Next Dimension on Thursdays, and then others sprinkled throughout. So it's a lot of fun. Please come hang out if you're not already a part of our Code It Live community. But without further ado, and Carl and TJ, I think we said we each have like, was it 40 minutes? I don't want to go over my time. So I think I will hand it over at 40, 45-ish to the next.
I did steal some time from you in the beginning, and I will make up for that when it's my time.
Oh, no worries. I generally talk fast anyways. It's fine. So, okay, so let's hop in. The first thing that I want to shout out to is we are now over 100 components old in KendoUI for Angular. And I'm just so excited about this news because, well, first of all, it's a lot cooler to say we've got 100 plus components. But secondly, it just shows how rich and just deep our suite is. So I was so excited about this news to celebrate 100 components. You should check out for more juicy details the What's New article. Carl writes these every release, and they're just pure gold. So if we're going too fast or there's something that you wanted to find a link to, a lot of things are linked to and like little demos or GIFs of that item with further details in this article. So check it out, kind of follow along, might be helpful. So these are the new components and features that we'll be talking about today. And then, God willing, if we have time, I'll be bringing up my Tour of Heroes Pwnafide demo that I usually use during releases that I've kind of added to and walking through a couple of these. So let's dive right in, shall we? I am gonna click. Oh, so one of the features, it's really funny because it seems like Carl was making a joke. He's like, I think the Angular team is releasing on our release day, like they're tracking when we release. And I'm like, I'm pretty sure that's exactly what's happening. So if you did not know, V12 released at the same day that we dropped our new R2 release. And so all of our components are fully up to date with Angular version 12. So really cool things this release. I'm just so excited about things like inline Sass. I know that's like, I don't know, some people might not be that excited about it, but I love CSS. I love Sass. I love working on the front of the front end. So when they're improving that part of the process, I was like, yes. So inlining Sass, super excited. We've got a ton of tooling support around Ivy, and as that grows and spreads to things like the language service for VS Code, which I think we have a really cool article actually on our blog about it. So lots of really cool stuff, and we are fully compatible. If you missed, you're like, wait, V12 happened? No one told me. On the Angular's official YouTube channel, they did a quick 30-minute keynote that covered the highlights for not only the framework, but the community as well right now. So check that out. But we're jumping right in. So the bottom navigation, she is one that I did include on our Tour of Heroes demo that hopefully we have time to get to. But this new component, it's essentially, we have an app bar and it's similar to that. Our app bar can be on the top, it can be on the bottom, but the bottom navigation, it glues itself to the bottom of the screen quite nicely. I don't know if anybody has ever had positioning and sticky issues where you're like, yeah, no, this component's totally going to be stuck to the bottom of the screen. And then you get to a certain screen size and you're like, why is it floating in the middle? So this, TJ, I hear you laughing.
I've been there, yeah.
Thank
but
you.
It looks like in a weird way, like you're like, there's like, why are there 10 pixels there? Like,
I know it's never like, yeah, that looks intentional. Like,
yeah,
it's just off enough to be like.
Never breaks in a clearly debuggable way.
So we have, I'm so excited about the bottom navigation. It is really cool. It actually plugs in, and I will make time to show you the demo, because it plugs into the Angular router and it uses the routes that you pass to it. And then you can add a little bit more configuration to your route config, where you give like text or icon, and then it's going to go ahead. You can use those to plug it into that bottom navigation that's glued to the bottom of your screen. So it's great for Angular apps that are responsive, purely for mobile, or even good old PWAs. So check out, with all of these slides, I put the link so that you can easily find it within components, navigation, bottom navigation. This one's pretty obvious, right? Like bottom navigation, it's underneath our navigation package, right, module. But some of them are like, where on earth am I going to find that? So yes, check that out.
Yeah, if you think naming things is hard, try to think of ways to name categories to logically group them under, so you don't just shove everything into one single package. Yeah.
No, that's the thing. It's like, oh, like once you start thinking about how, like where you can find, like again, MultiSelectTree. This one's pretty obvious. It's under dropdowns, but sometimes you're like, I will get to one that I was like, I don't know where to find this. Like one of my .NET friends was asking me, and I was like, I think it should be under layout, maybe. So it's so hard to organize. And I was actually talking with one of the writers of the Angular docs, who works for, he's on the Google team. He's a Googler, and he was telling me about how Angular has about 8 main categories that everything in Angular can be put underneath. And I was so impressed that their team was able to come up with 8, because I mean, like that's it. That's the categories that Angular lives in. So it is difficult sometimes. So that's why I thought it was really important to include the path to find it. And Carl and TJ, please interrupt at any point if anybody's like got fun tidbits in the chat or questions that are pertinent, but I will just keep chugging along. So yes, the multi-select tree renders data in a tree-like structure. It allows for multiple selections, as you can imagine. So I've got 2 different screenshots of 2 different, the left one is default, the right one is the material theme. But it also shows you, as you select, how it populates that drop down with those options that you're selecting from the multi-select tree. So if you're trying this, because it can be sometimes difficult to have different versions of different components. So if you want to go try the multi-select tree and you went and you ng added drop downs, you need to also make sure to do, there's like a tree view module package. Make sure you have the latest of that one too, because this is taking the best of both worlds to bring you a multi-select tree. So our third new component for this release, the CircleGauge. So this gauge uses a color arc over a fully enclosed circle that leaves the center room free for like a custom template that we call center template that can be defined by the developer. So you can add the ng template tag within the CircleGauge center template component. And so inside of that directive, you can just go ahead and add your ng template, as with much of our components, to customize the center and put what you'd like there. I think by default, it defaults to percentage, but obviously there's so much more that you can go into, and I have this one also included. So we'll show that off in a minute when we get to the demo app. The skeleton, by far my most favorite component. Did React get this? I think you said React got it, TJ.
Yeah,
Sure.
Your emoji game is on point though, so.
Thank you. Thank you, darling. So the skeleton is my favorite one. It takes the cake for R2 2021, but maybe it might top the list view, because before anybody would be like, hey, what's your favorite component? And I'd be like, list view is my girl. But skeleton, it's so amazing. And I have a really cool, like I have fully built out demo that we'll show of using the skeleton, because you can see in this card on the left side, this is the card that's like loading in before the data with like the avatar, the image, the, Tom Smith, all of that loads in. And so you can use, there's 3 different shapes. There's a text shape, a rectangle shape, and a circle shape. And you can use those 3 different shapes to really build out any kind of skeleton component that is there pre-data load. So it's really beautiful. It's a placeholder piece. It can speed up your initial load, but not only that, it's really, really great for UX, for like just giving the users a little bit of time, a little bit of a heads up of, hey, this is what's going to happen, instead of things just kind of popping into existence. So it's beautiful. Check it out. Skeleton is underneath indicators. So that's how you can find it. Yes. So those were our 4 new components: bottom nav, MultiSelectTree, CircularGauge, and skeleton. And now we're going to move on over to the new features list. And I have no idea, because like how inversion works with cameras, if I'm pointing to the new features list. This way?
There you go. Yeah.
Really? Oh, it's opposite for me. Okay, always point opposite. I have to like get that memorized. So I like to list out our new features. If you check out the blog post that I had linked to in the beginning, it goes into much further detail and it organizes them differently. I like to list out our new features based on the component that got the new feature, and then we'll get to the new feature in the slides. But yes, these are the new features. And then of course, we already talked about the very bottom one, the Angular V12 support. But it is time, my darlings, for a poll question before we get to those new features. So I think the beautiful Misho behind the scenes is going to start the poll for us. And I don't know if I'll be able to see it, so I'm just going to kind of do this face.
I think your camera might even be gone now as the poll is up, you know?
Is
So
it?
yeah, you're wasting a face on nothing. Oh no.
Oh!
You have to hold it now. Just
All right.
If you can't see it, the question is, which of these is most important to you when choosing a data grid? And so the options are performance, reduced development time, display features like paging, sorting, and such, styling, or documentation.
Oh, I found it. Yes, it looks like performance is winning right now. So get your answers in. We want to know.
No one cares about documentation though, so let's just drop. We'll just drop that.
well, as of today, we're just gonna drop all documentation and we'll
you viewers. Yeah, and it's the viewer's fault. You watching this, you didn't want it.
Yeah, I need you to know you're gonna hold that full responsibility.
I think it's funny. Like, these questions are always like hard because it's always going to be like, obviously you want all of these, right? It's one reason you use like KendoUI, KendoReact is because you want all of these, but it is interesting to see, looks like performance and features.
Yeah, performance and display features like paging, sorting, grouping, 1, and closely followed by reduced development time. Nice. Yeah, I think honestly, the reduced development time is like a no-brainer for a component library suite. Like in my brain, it's like I can obviously build a multi-select-tree dropdown, and that would take like years. So
yeah, that's,
like,
that's the way I talk about it as well. Anybody can do this. It just is a question of how many years will it take, right? And years at that point, right? Or development years, I should say.
Oh, all right. So like, you gotta let me know if there's any hype, any burning questions. I'm gonna move right into features, but please interrupt at any point. If anybody asks, maybe their question was answered, but it was really juicy, you know, and the others wanna know anything to bring interactivity, because I know this is a time of separation. All right, sticky columns and rows. This is a new grid feature. I made this beautiful GIF to demonstrate our sticky columns and rows, but they are visible at all times while the user scrolls through the KendoUI for Angular grid. Whether you're going horizontally or vertically, it'll just kind of stack, plop itself on the top, plop itself on the left or the right, like it just whichever way you're scrolling, which is really, really handy for really intense, heavy data grids, but you need to keep track of certain bits of information, right? And you don't want to be on your sticky notes writing that down while you're hunting through. So it's very useful. Check out underneath whether you want to make the columns sticky or the rows sticky. That's where you're going to find that documentation. So it's going to be underneath grid columns sticky or grid rows sticky.
And a little fun thing that makes it sticky is that if you scroll back where the original position was, so either up or down, and scroll past the original part where that row or that column was, it unsticks. So that's
it plops itself like back into its OG spot.
Exactly. So that's the difference between a locked or frozen column in a row and a sticky one, is that it does stick to either left, right, top, or bottom. But then once you scroll past it, that's when it will unstick. And this can be toggled either like we have here. We have a little magnet that kind of shows when it's being sticky or stuck. But you can do that programmatically. You can allow users to be able to determine if that column should be sticky or not as you're scrolling through it. So there's a lot of different ways that you can add this into your grids today.
We also need to give a bonus to whoever's idea it was to use magnet icons for this demo, because it's just so spot on. It's chef's kiss. Yeah.
When Carl was talking about how you could do it programmatically, or you could let the user decide what is sticky, I just imagine like really bothering someone with like a piece of information, like you will never scroll away from this row, right? Like, so be nice.
Sneak it in. Yeah, this row will haunt your dreams once you scroll past it. Yeah.
Oh, okay. So anyways, that's back to grid features. The next one is persisting the expanded state. So the grid now enables you to define and persist the expanded state of its groups and their hierarchical structure. I can't. Hierarchy.
Hierarchical. It's if you take my approach and just mumble your way through it, I naturally mumble too much. So that makes it seem like you know how to pronounce it when you don't.
Yeah, the middle syllables don't really matter. I mean.
Okay, hierarchical. Yeah, there we go. We're down. So in this video GIF thing that I made, as you toggle different groups open or closed, there is an array here of like fields with locations, and then as you can see, it's changing as we're expanding, as we're closing. And so that is the persisted data. So like, let's say the power goes out or user signs out, signs back in, et cetera, you can have those expanded group keys, and which I think is so kind. Honestly, we're just being real. This is like the most kind thing you can do for anybody using your grid, is to persist their state. Because, I mean, everyone gets busy, everyone gets distracted. You're in the middle of something, and like if you have a thick grid and you're like halfway through something and you're in the middle of the job, but then it resets completely, that can be pretty a time suck. So I love this feature. I know it's small, but it's also very beautiful and kind. So yeah, anything on this one, Carl or TJ, before I trundle my way through the, okay,
no,
here we go.
I like it.
Great.
Good. Improved accessibility. I think this might be the last one. So the filter menu, filter row, column menu, and checkbox column all received accessibility improvements. And they've taken care of several bug reports around accessibility issues as well. And I love testing out, I think, let's see, is she gonna play? There she goes. Can they hear this?
I do not hear. No, but I see
hear.
But I do see the keyboard commands, which is kind of fun.
That breaks my heart. Okay, so I'll just have to explain. I'll have to describe what's happening. So I made this video, and I'm using ChromeVox, the screen reader, and you can see I'm also using KeyCaster so that you can see the keys that I am typing. And so she is like announcing as we go through, and as I like tab through or as I arrow over and do different like keys like spacebar to select things. And so this was my video attempt to show you. So I was hoping you'd be able to hear her, but apologies. But yes, so this is just kind of showing off our improved grid accessibility and just the beauty of being able to navigate through with a keyboard and with a screen reader going. So yes, check out components/grid/accessibility to read more on what's changed and what you can do to improve your accessibility with your data grid. So, okay, yes, I thought that was the last one. So the next one is on our editor, and it is ProseMirror plugin support. So the KendoUI for Angular editor is based on ProseMirror. And with the R2 2021 release, we added the ability to integrate any ProseMirror plugin into the Angular editor. And so it's going to be underneath components/editor/plugins that you can read more about this. Carl, I didn't know anything about ProseMirror before this update, so I didn't know, like, I didn't even know they had more plugins to be added. So I don't know if you want to add anything to this, because this was news to me. I was like, oh, I didn't know we were based on ProseMirror. So
yeah, so with the KendoUI for Angular editor, and actually even the React editor, to throw some love that way, it is based on ProseMirror kind of as an underlying engine, and then of course we've added a ton of functionality on top of that. But we figured, since ProseMirror has been along for some time, it has a pretty vibrant community. If folks want to extend on top of our components, and either they already have done something like that themselves, they find something in the marketplace, or they just want to create something completely new or custom that we cannot do in the editor right now. Okay. This allows you to have the flexibility of creating something completely custom, right? Whether that's injecting some custom HTML, whether that's, it removes the need for you to go into the source code to modify things in order to be able to add in functionality that might be substantial on top of our editor. So this kind of gives that freedom for folks that are looking to maybe take the next step. Just generally we see this for very specific use cases that might not work from a general editor's perspective that your business requirements have, so that you need to spend some time on implementing this. So follows the standard format and everything like that, very reusable. So it's nice to see it added for sure.
That's wonderful. Very, very cool. So the next editor feature is Placeholder Support, which lets the developer set an initial stylized message in the editor content when a user is yet to provide their own text, giving the user context as to what is expected in the editor content area. And this can be found underneath, of course, components/editor as well. I couldn't find the exact, I was like, where is this detailed? So Carl, you might have to, I was like, I know it's under the editor, but where is placeholder support listed? Do you know?
It should just be using, just like with a regular like input or a text area, where you have the placeholder attribute, you should just be able to set something there, right? So this is just ensuring support for that using standard HTML attributes.
Beautiful, absolutely beautiful. Drop-down features. So there was quite a few of those. So post, open, and close events, child object binding, group checkbox selection, and programmatic focus on items. So lots of drop-down features, and of course the brand new MultiSelectTree drop-down itself. So yes, we will.
These are kind of hard to show demos of, so this is more an emphasis on taking a look at one of the more popular packages that we have, the drop-downs, and we really wanted to, and this is what you see within a lot of these features that we've introduced with R2, is a focus on highly requested features for existing components to ensure that we continue to, of course, not just look at the new stuff so that we can brag about the total number of components that we have, but also extend and continue to deliver as robust functionality as possible for existing components as well.
I love it. I absolutely love it.
To be clear, though, we are going to continue to brag about our total number of components.
Oh, yeah. I mean, constantly.
So the PDF generator got a new feature of export any SVG. And I believe, TJ, will you show this today on the React side?
I will show it on the React side, and it works. It's going to work the exact same way. So
this is he's going to demo it, Dan.
There, yeah.
I like that, Dan.
Awesome.
That's good. I think even I could do it.
No, it's not like one of those fancy TikTok dances, all right? So yes, you are going to witness this firsthand when we get to the React section, but like you said, it'll work the same for the Angular PDF generator, and it's really actually very cool because you can now export pages that might have like SVG graphics on it, like whether it's a chart or a CircleGauge or whatever the SVG item is itself, and then it shows up in the PDF all beautiful and nice. So excited to show that one off. Check out the PDF export under components to read more in our docs. Yes, so the calendar got a new feature of multiple date selection. And this is a screenshot over on the left and the bottom of that in action, what it looks like, where you can even omit. So it's not just like selecting in a row, you can select random dates at will. So if your HTML includes any, that's from the SVG thing. So to enable multi-selection, set the selection input property to multiple on your calendar. So check out date inputs calendar / multiple selection in the docs to try it out today. So checkboxes. So the tree view, it's funny because you kind of see how all these features like fall into place because we got the multiple select tree view. You saw that the dropdowns got some extra features, and now you're seeing that the tree view got some extra features to bring you this beautiful component that marries the two. So the tree view got checkboxes and allows the users to select a single node or multiple nodes by using those checkboxes. So there's a screenshot on the right-hand side of the screen of that in action. And check it out on /components /tree view /checkboxes to read more.
And just to add a little bit more context there to help out. So we have had checkboxes in the tree view. However, especially in large data sets, if you're loading kind of on demand as nodes are being expanded, we didn't have those helpful directives that allow you to kind of control, okay, if the parent is checked, then also check the children as they're getting loaded, or we uncheck the parent and then from a previous list that might have been saved as checked, things like that. Okay. So this is essentially just providing some additional services and some additional functionality around controlling how and when to select nodes that are children of the items that you're interacting with as those children are loading.
So do you know about the other feature that was added to TreeView of delaying the node drag event? And is that related to this nested selection feature?
So that one is just to ensure that if there are other interactivity that you want to add into the tree view when items are being dragged, that you can, or not dragged, but maybe it would trigger the node drag event, you can actually create a delay to ensure that doesn't trigger always, if that makes sense, right? There might be some specific scenarios where you might want to wait a little bit to ensure that somebody is attempting to drag the node as opposed to just firing it right away. So that's why we added that in there.
Awesome. So check out the tree view for those details. Date input. So we have a new date input of supporting 2-digit years, as you can see in the date input, which is over here. So check out date input /formats to see more on the 2-digit year format. And they also had accessibility improvements added to the date input itself as well. So
a fun little thing about this, by the way, that I found out fairly recently. So we can see here that we have a 21 at the end, right? So that we can probably safely assume that it's 2021. But you can actually define what century the 2-digit years is going to automatically assume, right? And you should even be able to do this depending on, like, if it's a certain day, you might want to set 1990 something or 2000 something. So you can even extend that to be a little bit flexible with like your business rules and your assumptions that you have about it. Because what if you're creating an application that is dealing with logging data that has so far just been on paper in the early 1900s, right? Then writing 21 should be 1921 as opposed to 2021. So you can just do this through configuration options, and you don't necessarily have to do manual calculations around what year it is. So that's a neat thing that's happening under the hood, and something that you can configure.
Very cool. That's awesome. I think this is the last of the features. So we have, let's see, we've got a couple minutes. I'm going to close out of the keynote, but you almost like, tell me you're still here. All right, I'm still on the webinar, yes.
You're still here.
Yeah, you do still
exist. That would have been so bad.
It's a good existential check, though.
Do I even exist? Hello?
Yeah, is this still reality?
Right? I love you all. Okay, so can you see my terminal?
Yes.
Yeah.
Awesome. Best news ever. Okay, so I have an application called the KendoUI Tour of Heroes Releases version. And if for those of you who don't know, took the Tour of Heroes app and I added My Little Ponies because I love ponies, specifically the My Little ones. But I every release, like to update it with our new components. So at GitHub, you can go to Alyssa Michelle, which is my username there, and check this out. I don't know if there's a way like in chat. I don't want to like be rude. I don't. Is there like an easy way of sharing, or is that not?
Oh yeah,
possible?
actually, one of our helpers, Misho, took care of it already. So thank you, Misho. Posted it to the entire audience. Yep.
Yeah, you're awesome. Okay, so check this out. Pull it down. Run whenever you get it on your machine. Run npm install and then ngserve, and you should be golden. I updated it to Angular v12, and it has all of the 4 new components already installed and running, which you will see very shortly. So let's go check it out right here. Local cannot be. You're so funny. Okay, let's put it here. I need to pull up VS Code. 1 second, darlings. So we're gonna go to terminal because I want to show you the code, not just the beautiful components. VS Code. Okay. So while that is opening, here's the My Little Pony app, the dashboard with our gorgeous card components. And then over here on the side, this is a new, as of this release, I'm going to start doing this. I thought it made a lot of sense to have a sidebar that includes like live versions of our new components. And if I have time, I will also do features as well. So this has the skeleton component, and that's its live version. The bottom nav, that's it living and breathing. The CircularGauge and the MultiSelectTree, which I like is auto-populating. As Carl said, when you select that parent node, it selects for the per the tree view functionality, it's selecting those children and populating them into that input field. So, and then you can of course modify it as needed. But yes, so those are the 4. They are there. They're just right on the dashboard. If we go ahead and open up, no, not you. No, not you, terminal. Okay. We'll put this no, hang on. Pondering my life. We're going to put it on the right side, and we're going to put you on the left side. And if you'll notice something fun, when you get to a certain width, the bottom nav pops in, and it is workable. She's working, routable. So the idea here is when you get to mobile, what I want to do is hide this top nav here and make this bottom nav the go-to one. So I don't have a ton of time, but I want to show you a couple of configuration things. So if you're checking out the sidebar and you want to look at those components, how they're implemented, what's going on, you're going to want to go to the, as you might have guessed it, sidebar component. And I can make this a little bit bigger. And inside the sidebar component, that's where you're going to find the Kendo cards that include the skeleton, they include the gauge, the bottom nav, and MultiSelectTree. So check out the sidebar component if you just want to jump straight to those. Otherwise, let's talk a bit about the bottom navigation, which I have implemented in app component HTML. So at the top, you'll see my really fancy thing that I'm doing with data text to get, this is actually selectable, not the rainbow, but all of these headers are selectable and copy pastable, etc. And that's what I'm doing with the fancy data text. So check out the CSS if you're interested in that fun trick. But if you scroll down, you'll see the normal nav, which I will be hiding on certain screen sizes. And then if you go down to the very bottom, you'll see my Kendo navigation that I've implemented. And it's looping through items. It has a fill of solid. And I think the other one is, oh, what is the other one? TJ's going to get on to me for not installing that extension yet.
Oh, yeah. See if you had VS Code configured correctly, it could just tell you what the other option is. I don't know it off the top of my head.
It should be flat.
Flat. Okay.
God bless you. You're just beautiful, Carl. Has anyone ever told you how beautiful you are?
Oh, shucks.
Oh, okay. So the text, the icon and text are, the colors aren't, they're not proper because I'm manually overwriting those for solid state because I wanted hot pink, okay? And I wanted it to be our hot pink, so I wanted it to match. But yes, you do have the option of solid or flat, and then you can also pass in what theme you even want, theme color, as far as we've got basic theme colors, but then as you can see, you can customize it as well as I did. Let's show these items though. I want to show what we're actually looping through. So if we open up our TypeScript and check out our app component here, you'll see that I have created well, I guess we really don't need to, we don't really need to, did you ever like push like console log out in the live and you're like, wow, that's out there. Okay, so we'll ignore that that was even there. Everyone ignore line 25. So here for the routes that I'm getting from our router config, we're looping through those. And if the route has an icon, I'm going ahead and pushing it into items. And that's what's getting fed here. And you might be like, why not just give them all of the routes? And that's because I have things like hero details page, which it wouldn't make sense. Let's go ahead and open her up right here. So here is our routes, and it wouldn't make necessary sense to have line 9 and 10, these two routes, to be displayed down there. So I took my existing route config, I added this text and this icon, and then I'm just pulling that into our component here and using it. And I'm setting the default state of selected to true on the first item, but I think I would want to get a bit more programmatic than this manual bud maybe. I want to think about it. I might do it even with just CSS. I think there's a way to be like, hey, you're active, so be active with Angular. Anywho, back to, I need to pass it over very, very soon, and I apologize for taking up some of your time, but I wanted to show a little bit more. So that is the bottom nav in all her glory. Again, check out the app component HTML if you want to play around with it. We have, what was the other one? Oh, my absolute all-time favorite, which I have no time to show you, but I'm going to speed run through it. So hero details page has always needed a bit of love, like, let's be honest. And so I decided this release that we were going to give it the proper love and care that it deserves. So I cleaned up the data a little bit, a smidge. Don't be judging the UI just yet. I'll let you know when you can judge, and then you can tweet just directly at me with your judgments. Okay, but for now, I cleaned it up a smidge, and when this data loads in, I am setting a manual delay on this data so that we can see things like indicators and, we're getting to it, the skeleton. But sometimes that delay would be real, right? Like sometimes whether it's connection or network or just data that's loading, sometimes that delay is going to be real. And that's where the skeleton component just, oh, it's amazing. So let's go to our hero details page that I told you got the facelift. And we're going to uncomment this section. And if you'll notice, I have an ngIf on this section when there's not a hero. And I've given it a skeleton section class that I am using to nestle all the styles inside of. So check out the SCSS. But here, it's just, I copy pasted the section that had all those details, and then I stripped out the data bindings, and I plugged in these Kendo skeletons with a shape of text, or with a shape, if we scroll all the way down, of circle for the avatar, and then even rectangle for bigger chunks of loading like areas, if you will. So if we save this, we go here, we refresh our page, you'll see that it has this loading where it's loading in these different chunks of data and then they populate. Now, I do have still a little bit of work. I'm going to take off this ngIf so that we can just stare at it in all its glory. I do have a little bit of work to do so that it matches up better with the real data. What I mean by that is the occupation isn't quite the right height, so there's some popping there. And then the width of this entire details section does change a bit when it loads in. So I just want to get everything to where as the user staring at it, nothing pops, right? No popping. Thank you. But yeah, I love the skeleton component. I think she's my new favorite. I think she's going to say it. Oh, I almost forgot. There's 2 different animations, and I don't know if you can tell with the webinar. Sometimes like animations don't render that well over the wire, but there's pulse and then there's wave. And so here we have animation pulse set on the pony name, and then the pony ID has wave. And so they are very subtle, and I do think you should maybe be consistent with which one you use, but there is that option that I wanted to talk about. There's also, I think there's a couple other features other than width and height, which you can set here as we're doing, like directly on the skeleton, or you can go ahead and use CSS, whatever you pick, whatever you choose. But I think that's, I have a little bit more. I think we're going to go ahead and end it there though, so I don't take up too much more time. But please do check out the KendoUI Tour of Heroes if you're interested in seeing these demos and playing with them. And yeah, feel free to tweet at me if you have any UI tips. So is it going to Carl or TJ? Do you know who is doing the what?
I am doing the next slot. It is React next.
React, and we're gonna get that PDF demo, which I was promised. Maybe.
Hype for the PDF demo, yeah.
But thank you, everyone. I'll be reading through your questions and comments, so if you have anything Angular, still throw them in. But TJ and React, take it away.
All right. Awesome. Yeah, thanks, Alyssa. That was awesome. And I think it'll be nice because some of the features are the same with KendoReact. So you can get a little sense of how these things work regardless of what tech stack you're using. And I guess I could just start by just doing a quick time check so people know they're in the right place. I'm TJ. I'll be covering the KendoReact portion of this release for the next 40-ish minutes or so. So if you're here,
I'm sorry about that. I totally took 7 minutes of your time. So
you're cool. If you're here for jQuery and Vue, just hang tight for a few minutes. I'll try to keep you entertained. You can learn a little bit more about React, which is of course the correct choice here. But I kid. Melissa mentioned this earlier. I have a few plugs. We're doing a lot of stuff on Twitch. If you do React stuff, I run a weekly show on Wednesdays called React Wednesdays, where basically I bring in cool people from the React world, have them more or less just share their screen and teach me something cool. So if you like hanging out, learning about React stuff, you might want to check that out. And on June 2nd, I'm actually running an event where I'm doing React Wednesdays kind of all day. We're inviting in 7 or 8 different guests. We've got Kent C. Dodds, we've got Mark Erickson, E. Porcello, Ryan Florence. So some pretty cool guests that are going to be joining us. If you want to sign up, it's a totally free event. We're just doing it on Twitch. So I'd love to have you to come hang out. All right, but today we're talking KendoReact and the new features. And there are 3 new components that we shipped as part of this release: the external drop zone, the skeleton, and the CircularGauge. And we've got some new features as well. So some updates to our demos that I'm actually really excited about that I'll show you here in a second. Some updates to the grid, some of these other controls as well. I'd like to demo these in just a live app so that you can see them in action and show these off in our demos. So I'm going to switch over to that so that we can actually start to dive in and see some of these features. But before I do that, while I get my dev environment set up, I know we have a poll that we want to run for React as well. So if we could toss that up.
Yeah, there it is. Which of the following most accurately describes your approach to app design? We use an unmodified version of an established design system. We are about to create our own design system from scratch. We have an existing design system and we apply to KendoUI, or we're not interested in design systems is the poll.
I'm curious to see.
I think it started. I'm pretty sure. I mean, it's showing up on my screen. I can't vote though. I don't count. Oh yes, there they come in. So
yeah, I'm very interested in this just because I think it's
fascinating. No one has voted for about to create our own design system from scratch. Oh, there it goes. There it goes. I was like, nobody's doing this.
A lot of existing design systems, which is interesting. And we apply it to KendoUI. So that's actually kind of fascinating to me. It's cool to know that so many people are building design systems and integrating Kendo into it.
Yeah.
So I think we got another minute or so to leave this up.
Aw, someone said only 20 minutes for jQuery. That was Pat McGuire. It's okay, Pat. We love jQuery. I love jQuery. There's no jQuery hate on this team.
No. Oh man, I don't have my, I should have got my jQuery hat and headband somewhere over there.
Oh, excellent.
To go grab them. So the poll, it looks like we have an existing design system we apply to KendoUI. Well, that is good to know. That's interesting. And then the rest of the options have a pretty even spread. So thanks for participating in that. I definitely find that interesting. All right. So back to the features. So these are the same list of features that I showed in slides. I just got them in a markdown file to make them a little bit easier to parse and read. And then I've got a sample app over here that's going to give me a place where I can show off these features in a live running app. And so what we're going to do is we're just going to go sequentially down the list here, talk about each of these features, show them off. And if you do have any questions, drop them in the questions. We've got people on the line that can help out with that sort of stuff. And the first on the list is new hooks in TypeScript demos. And this is maybe the thing I'm most excited about with this release. And basically what this is if you view source now on any of the demos that are on our documentation site, there are these new controls where you can switch between JavaScript and TypeScript implementations of the demos, and also hooks and class component-based implementations of the demos. So if you wanted to say, like, let me see this code in, oh, this is TypeScript by default. So with TypeScript, you'll see things like sometimes these props will have the types on them, which is a nice little helper. It can help the IntelliSense when you're developing. Same sort of thing if you need to switch between hooks and class components. It just makes our code a bit more copy and pastable and easy for you to implement in your apps. So I'm pretty excited about this. This actually helped me as I was building up some of these demos because I am a TypeScript fan, and I found it super useful to have some of the correct types in there by default. I do have to give one caveat. Not all of our demos have full support for this quite yet. We actually did a count and we have over 1,800 demos that are part of the KendoReact site. So as you might imagine, there's a bit of grunt work involved with getting them all up to supporting all of these features. So a lot of our more common components have this right now, but give us some patience as we work through the demos. But we hope this helps you out. I know it's helped me out personally, and I'm pretty excited about this. I think it's pretty cool. Alyssa, Carl, are you TypeScript people?
All the way.
Yeah.
Not yet. I know how good it is. I just don't like my code yelling at me. I prefer my browser to yell at me.
I wouldn't say, I mean, I don't think you can Angular without TypeScript now. I think maybe back in the day you could, but I don't.
I think at first they said you could, but then they sort of realized no one was doing it.
Totally took that back. I was there for that. My company at the time was like, hey, I think we're going to use CoffeeScript with the new version of Angular because they're going to make it possible. And then the team was like, nope.
It was like, yeah, about that. All right, so our first of our components on the list is the external drop zone. And I think this is one of those things that's easier just to see it to understand what it's doing. So in my sample app, I've got a little support form here, and I'm going to go drop an external drop zone in here. And we'll give that a second. And basically what this is going to do is give us an area where we can drag and drop files into our app. So it shows up here. And really to use the external drop zone, all you need to do is connect the component to an upload component. The upload component is not new to KendoReact. It's something we've had for a while. It's kind of like a little like file manager for your browser. So you can provide endpoints for what to do with these files when they're uploaded, how people can remove files as well. But once you've made this connection, essentially what you can do is, in this case, drop a file in, save it, provide some endpoints for however it is you want to process these files. So it's just a nice little thing. I see this pattern, this sort of drop zone appearing more and more. And you can totally configure this. See, Alyssa, I totally get code complete here. If I wanted to add like a custom hint to this, I could say like drag and drop an image of your issue here. And I'll see it here. My compiler is running a little bit slow, but there we go. You can customize all of this. And if we head out to the documentation, so the drop zone, the external drop zone, it's going to appear in the documentation under the upload package. So it's going to be upload external drop zone. And you can read more about it. You can customize this. This is all just, it's all web-based. So you can use CSS to go nuts with this as well, too, if you have a custom look for this thing in mind and just let KendoReact do the heavy lifting in terms of the messy file processing and all that stuff. So that's the external drop zone. So check that out, especially really any app that needs to accept files from the user, I think could benefit from this. And all right, next on the list is the skeleton. So if you saw Alyssa's section, you got a little preview of what this looks like, but I'm going to show you what this looks like in our little dashboard app. So if I go to, actually, we'll go to the homepage of this. You can see that my data on here takes a few seconds to load in. And at the moment, I'm not doing anything to provide a nice experience for that. The user just gets a white screen. And you have options for how to deal with this. Like you could put up a spinner. That's probably the most common thing that people do. But the skeleton gives you another interesting option for handling this. So what I could do, just to throw one of these things in there, is by default right now I'm saying wait until I have some data. That's essentially what this line of code is doing. And once I have it, render a card for each item in my list. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to say, actually, let's just render the card all the time. And we'll conditionally load this version of the card if we have data. But what I'll also say is, let's additionally render a separate version of this when we don't have data. And I'll let this compile so that you can see what this looks. But you'll see that I'm using the skeleton component. I'm using 3 different variations for text, a circle, and a rectangle. And I actually have to do a hard refresh so that you can actually see this. So you'll see you kind of get like this little preview of what's coming in. And at least to me, I think this is a nice little like UX trick to like cut down on the perceived loading time of your application, because you're sort of giving the user a hint of what's coming. And at least to me, it's a little more seamless. It's a little more smooth. I know, Carl, were we saying like Google Images does this, this sort of trick? I think I've seen a couple Google, because I think Google Photos does this as well, actually, where it just shows you this little preview.
Yeah, and there's also like Teams uses it a lot for chat. So if you're loading a long chat, you'll see individual messages with kind of a, you know, standard layout, right? If somebody wrote a paragraph, you're not going to be able to see the entire paragraph, but it gives at least an idea of what is coming, which helps out. And bonus points, there are some of these implementations that actually try to pick up the primary color of what's going to be presented and use that. Yeah, so like with the progress logo, we might use, you know, the green color right here, right? And have that be the color of the skeleton, if that's the kind of the primary color. But that's extra credit, and you have to do some calculations if you're going to do this dynamically, and if you don't know what the primary color is of the content you're loading.
It's cool though, and I like, it's funny because once we had this component and I started looking for them, it surprised me how often I'm running across this pattern. So if you want to implement this, KendoReact and this component is going to make your life a little bit easier. It's going to be under the indicators package, so indicators skeleton, and you can configure a couple things like the shape. We already looked at that, but also the animation as well. So you can do wave or pulse animation. I don't have a strong opinion. Maybe you do, maybe your designer does, but you can configure it based off your needs.
Yeah, I mean, like pulse for life, but yeah, wave's good too.
It's funny, some people have like strong opinions on this, and I'm just like, yeah, whatever works for me. All right, next on our list, CircularGauge. So I'm actually just gonna drop one in here cold, just because it's gonna make it easier to talk about what this thing is. It's another one of these, it's funny, I know, Alyssa, you ran into this too. When the name really is quite descriptive, it's hard to describe what it is because you end up just repeating like, so the CircularGauge component, it's a circular gauge.
So you see it's a gauge.
Yeah, but it's a circle.
It's circle shaped.
So what I'm doing with this UI here is like, let's assume this list of people here is like some sort of like either like a leaderboard, or we want to show some progress towards some challenge. So I'm using the CircularGauge here to show like sort of progress towards a goal. And what I like about the API of this component is, at least I find it very readable, because what you provide is an array of colors, like in a range. So from 0 to 25, I want this gauge to be red. And if I scroll down here, you see red. And then I provide a couple other sort of breakpoints up here, which I find readable. And it's also easy to make this like as granular as you want this to be. Like maybe you want to just show like red, green, like once you reach some certain threshold, you've like succeeded. Or maybe you want like 20 of these things. You can sort of control what you want here. And also this little function here that comes in through the center render prop that basically says, what do you want to show in the middle of this thing? And what I like about it is KendoReact does some of the heavy lifting in terms of positioning this, controlling where this goes. So you as a developer just need to say, you know, what am I going to render here? And KendoReact takes care of the trickier aspect of where it's going to put this, making sure it shows up in the middle. And overall, I think it's just a handy little component for any time you need to show this sort of thing. And you can go beyond, like this is actually quite a simple gauge compared to what you can do. So if you're looking for the documentation on this, there is a gauges package, and you'll see that the CircularGauge is here. There's some other gauges. Again, if you want bonus points, you can look over all the other gauges that we support. But for the CircularGauges, if you want to get a sense of what sort of thing you can configure and do, I'd recommend checking out this scale options, the very bottom demo here, because it's going to give you a sense of just all the things that you can configure. Like you can show labels within the gauge if you want to, or you can hide it. You can show ticks within the gauge. You can control which ticks show up. You can control the color of literally everything. You can reverse it. I am not sure why you'd want to reverse it, to be honest with you, but you can. That's an option. You can do it. So there's a lot of things you can control. So if you have this sort of need, if you see a place where you could use this sort of gauge in your app, it's just going to be Gauges CircularGauge, and check it out. I just think it's a nice little handy little component that I can see being totally useful for something kind of exactly like this. Or really, like, I think you could probably use it for like a speedometer or any sort of like metric where you want to show where somebody is at on some sort of a range. It's kind of nice, and being able to control what shows up in the center is useful. All right, so those are components, but we also have some pretty cool features that shipped as part of this release as well. So with the grid, we have this ability to do selection and range selection. And I've got a grid in this sample app that we'll use to show this off. And to make selection possible, there's a couple things you need to do, but the primary thing, there's this new, check out my code complete, Alyssa. I know you're jealous, because you also get code complete once you're within this as well, which is
I'm opening up my extensions right now, and I'm remedying this situation.
So to enable this selection, the first thing you need to do is pass a selectable prop, and that's going to be an object, and you need to just set this enabled flag to true. So there's a little bit of extra like boilerplate code that I'm going to show you here in a second, but this is the crux of enabling it. And when you do enable it, as you might expect, it's called selectable. You basically give your users the ability to select, by default, rows within your grid. So if for whatever reason they need to select rows, you can do this. The bit of boilerplate code is you also need to provide this on selection change event handler. And essentially there's a bit of code, and I'll show you where this is on at the docs, to just manage, just basically track what is selected. And that's both for KendoReact's purposes, because we need to know when we re-render the grid to remember which things the user selected. And also for your purposes as well, because presumably you're having the user select something from the grid because you want to do something with it. So this gives you a place where then you could take it and send it to your backend, or put it in local storage, or make something else show up on the screen, or whatever it is you want to do. That's the reason for letting users select things within the grid. And this isn't just limited to row selection. So there's a couple other things you can do here. You can set the mode to multiple. And what that's going to do is let you select multiple rows. So I have to hold, I'm on a Mac, so I'm holding my command key down to select multiple rows. If you're on Windows, it's going to be the control key, but you can select multiple rows. You can also enable cell mode. And what that's going to let you do is not just not select rows, but to allow users to actually select individual cells within your grid. So I can go like this, and since the mode is set to multiple, I can also hit my command key and go like this. I can build like a tic-tac-toe or a checkerboard pattern. I think checkerboard's the word I was looking for, right? Like this sort of thing. I don't know, if you want to play with it, it's fun times. You can mess around with it. And the last option in here that you might want to do, because I've seen this in a lot of apps, a lot of spreadsheet apps especially, is you can offer drag selection, which is going to let me take my mouse and select chunks of cells. And if you had it on row mode, you could use this to select rows as well, and basically select chunks of things using the mouse. And then, like I said, it's gonna the grid with this bit of boilerplate code will keep track of that state in this selected state. And from there, you can do whatever it is you need to do with these selections. And if you need to learn more about this, you can head to, so it's in the grid part of the documentation. There's a whole selection page in there with a number of different demos that's going to show you not only how to implement sort of the boilerplate I just talked about, but also how to customize this. So I could totally see if you want to add like a checkbox to working with this, So you're not only selecting it, but you're also giving the user a little bit more of visual feedback through a checkbox. That's an option as well. And you can head to the documentation if you want to see a demo of how to make that possible. All right, there are a couple other new grid features as well. The next one is around virtualization. So first of all, before I show the thing that's new here, just if you haven't tried virtual scrolling through really any of our grids, the KendoReact one, the Angular one, or whatever, it's a really awesome feature, especially if you're dealing, well, most notably if you're dealing with huge data sets. So just to show you what I mean, this is a demo that is rendering, I think it's, 50,000 rows of data. And if I go to this example, you can see I can scroll through this like crazy fast, right? And I can even grab this and fast forward to 40,000 rows. And the way this works is that instead of actually rendering 50,000 rows, under the hood, KendoReact is actually virtualizing the grid. That's where the term virtualization comes from. And it's only going to render, there's going to be like 20 of these rows instead. So the magic that's happening under the hood is KendoReact is basically just reusing 20 grid rows and sort of slotting data in intelligently for working with this. So definitely just in general, the virtualization feature is worth checking out if you're dealing with large data sets. But what's new during this release is this ability to add placeholders while you're doing this virtualization. So if you do have 50,000 rows, chances are that data is going to be on some server somewhere. You probably don't have those 50,000 rows just locally available to the user. And so if I scroll down, this is under this new debouncing page change events part of the documentation. And you'll see, and this might, I don't know how well this is going to come across on the webinar. So Alyssa, Carl, you'll have to let me know if you see this, but essentially occasionally you'll see like little placeholders as the data is sort of coming back from the server when it's not ready, because like with 50,000 rows, you're going to have to constantly sort of ping the server back and forth to sort of get that data. And the magic behind this is there is a new prop on the grid called cell render. And basically this acts as more or less like a pass-through. It's KendoReact saying, hey, I'm about to render this cell, but do you want to show something different instead? So in this case, the logic is saying, if I don't have anything yet, like if I'm about to render the cell and there's going to be nothing in it, let's instead show like a placeholder, essentially like the little skeleton that we showed earlier. Else, then I'll just do the default. So you just provide a slightly nicer user experience when you're working with these large data sets. And actually too, there's this demo I highly encourage checking out anyways, because it's more of just a real world example of how you do virtualization. Because there's also some code in here too. This is where the title comes from, debouncing. Alyssa, Carl, are you familiar with the bouncing term?
Yes.
At all? Yeah, so for anybody that hasn't heard of it before, it's basically, so if you're doing virtualization, if I'm scrolling through this, KendoReact is gonna fire off like page change events like mad, right? It's gonna say constantly like, hey, there's new stuff, there's new stuff, like absolute mad. And you don't want to spam the server with all those requests, right? It's a great way to like DDoS your own infrastructure of saying like, I need data, I need data constantly. So what this demo is going to show you how to do is essentially to debounce, or I think the simple way of explaining it is essentially you just like sort of wait a second to make sure you actually need the data or the appropriate data before you spam it. So you're almost like rate limiting your requests and making sure that you're requesting the data that you actually need. And it provides just an elegant way of showing this in like a real world context, because there actually is a back end behind this. And it's a little more real worldy than just seeing like a local 50,000 item array. So if you are dealing with large data sets, highly recommend checking this out. It's pretty cool. Debouncing page change events. So again, that's going to be under scroll modes, virtual scrolling. All right. Okay. A couple new features with the grid. Alyssa mentioned this because we also ship this as part of KendoUI for Angular, but there's some changes to how we work with groups as part of this release. There's some new things in the Kendo Data Tools package. So KendoReact Data Tools here. That's going to make a couple of new things possible with groups. So for example, there's a new demo that shows how you can offer buttons to expand and collapse all groups. So if you're working with groups in your KendoReact grid, if you have a lot of them, there's some different things you can do. So this demo shows how you can expand and collapse all of them at once. And so this is going to be in grid grouping basics. And actually the next demo here, persisting group change during paging, I believe it's right up here. So similar, this is coming from new utilities in the data tools package. And essentially what it's going to do is just remember things that have been expanded and collapsed when you go do other things. So basically I collapsed a bunch of these things. I'm going to do some other things in my app, right? I'm messing around. When I return to this, you'll see that it sort of persisted those changes. It remembered which things the user has expanded and collapsed. And if you're curious how this works, if you're dealing with groups in your applications, check out this demo on persisting the group's collapse state and just some of these new utilities in the data tools package, just because it makes a slightly nicer user experience for your users, especially if I know some of you work with some of these incredibly complex grids where the user might have a ton of groups open and a bunch of things they're multitasking on at once. So this is just a nice way to improve your experience. So check it out. All right, did I not? Okay, I got to check all these off because my OCD doesn't allow me to just accidentally skip one of these.
Yeah, otherwise you have to go back to them. Yeah.
Yeah, well, we just have to do them again. All right, next, DatePicker DateTime Picker. So let's head back to our support page. This is a quick one to show off. You might know that we supported floating labels in KendoReact for quite a while. I've actually got it on this, oh yeah, there we go. I clicked the wrong thing. I've got it on this basic input, but as of this release, you can now do this on the date pickers as well. So if I find the right thing I need to type in, basically I can add a date picker control. And the only trick to know to what you need to do to enable it is you need to provide an empty placeholder. And if you do that, you'll get this nice floating label that's consistent with other form controls that you have in your application. The reason you need to empty out this placeholder is if you do provide one, just the default of the date picker shows like the date format the user has to type in. So, which might be what you want. So depending on what you want, you can configure what the placeholder shows to determine whether you want a floating label or not.
Yeah, this one was a little bit tricky because as you can tell, you have the original placeholder and then you have the mask that appears. So one of the reasons it took us a little while was to come up with the most intuitive way to be able to handle that. And also, of course, from accessibility perspective and everything, and because it's not just, swapping out the text in there, there is more happening underneath. So, but yeah, it's neat how immediately the mask is there and you're good to go once you enter the component.
Yeah, I feel like this is one of those, occasionally, like I cover a feature that I know is an absolute ton of work to do under the hood, and then I show it and I put in like one line of code and it's like, oh yeah, so this is how you do it.
Yeah, we've done all the hard stuff behind the scenes,
Yeah. Well, cool. And speaking of that, that's actually a good segue to PDF generation, right? Because it's another one of those features that like is super seamless, but behind the scenes, there's a bit of work to make happen. So new to this release is the ability to export any SVG. And I'll show that, but I just wanted to quickly show you, just in case you're not familiar, just how the PDF generator in KendoReact works, because if you haven't seen it before, it's quite slick. So let's say you have a dashboard that's a part of your app, and your users want to be able to export what they're seeing. So doing this is quite simple. So all I need to do is, first of all, I'm going to start by just creating a button. So this is just a standard button. It's going to let me export a PDF, and I'll define this function. So export PDF. And all I'm going to do, just to show you the world's simplest way of doing this, and then we'll build up from this. So I can say save a PDF. So this is coming from the KendoReact PDF package. And I'm going to keep this really simple. You can get way more complex with this, but I'm just going to say by default, I want to make a PDF of the entire document, just document body, show the whole thing to me, and then we can go from there. And with those like 3 lines of code, I now have an export as PDF button. KendoReact will take care of creating a PDF for my document, and it will show the entire thing. It'll render the entire thing to a PDF, which I think is pretty cool. Like I've done this a few times and I'm still sort of staggered that this is possible. Like PDFs always strike me as like a really arcane tech, and just being able to create these from the web, I think is pretty slick personally. And we're just getting sort of started on what this thing can do. There's a lot more to it, but I did want to focus on the part that's new for this release, the ability to export any SVG. So SVGs are common. These charts are actually SVG, and you saw that those came through to the PDF quite fine. These things, though, if we go back to our homepage, these avatars that are going to pop in here in a second are also SVGs. So one cool thing you can do is I am going to show you just to do this again. I'm going to bring in the exact same button that I did before, and we'll bring in, we're going to be smart here, right? We're smart developers. We can copy and paste. Going to bring in the export PDF button, but this time I actually don't want to do the document body. I'm going to create a ref. So I'm going to say this is a chart container. And I'm going to go up here and say, I'm going to format this totally wrong, but that's okay. Chart container, react.use ref, and it's going to yell at me for spelling it wrong. Create a reference to just this div here, because this is all I want in my PDF. Like I don't want my header in my PDF. I don't want my avatar in my PDF. And then all I have to do is go in here and say, let's go and save a PDF with the chart container instead of the document body. And with those, like sort of, that was a few more lines of code, right? That was like 6 lines of code or whatever. I can now export a PDF, and it's smart enough to export just the parts that I told it to. And also, look, the SVGs came through just fine as well. So I can export my leaderboard and I can share it within Acme. So pretty cool. Like I said too, like this save PDF thing, like we actually nerded out on Twitch the other day because we found that there's a lot to PDFs. There's whole things like there's a concept of a paper size, which is nuts because there's like A0 through A10. There's an executive paper size. There's a folio. And shout out if you need those things. So just so you know, those are available as well. Or you could just do what I did and take the defaults and consider it good enough. Great to ship to your users as well. So I don't know, I think this is pretty cool. I still sort of geek out about how easy that is to use.
Yeah, this is one of those things that blows my mind how easy it is to use, but how difficult it probably is under the hood, because we've been able to export our charts which are SVG or Canvas elements through this, but that's because we know what our charts are going to look like. So we have bounds around what those elements are going to be. This allows you to take essentially any SVG element. You saw the avatars you created here, you saw the emojis or like the smaller icons that are in there as well as SVG elements, right? All that is being included, and it's just some sort of magician and wizard figured out how to do it, and then under the hood, it just automatically just exports. It's crazy.
Yeah, no, it's pretty slick. I was impressed when I did this and it just worked the first time. I was like, oh, I'm done. Sort of expect something like this to take more time, but it's pretty slick. All right, I'm gonna go through the last few features here. So there's an update to our scheduler. This one is actually one you'll just get by updating your version numbers. There's nothing you need to do to enable this, but essentially you can now select and operate on multiple events simultaneously. So if I use the command key on my Mac, it'll be control on Windows. I can select multiple events. I can move them, I can resize them. So this is behavior that's pretty common on desktop calendar applications, and we're bringing this to our web scheduler. And that, like I said, that's the default behavior, but there's also a section on the documentation in scheduler customization items that'll show you how you can customize this. So if you do like those keyboard shortcuts, maybe you already have some keyboard shortcuts you're using for your schedulers, or you want some custom triggers, some custom ways of this to work, check this out. You can sort of go into some more advanced ways if you want this to work, or you could just be happy with the default behavior, which is you're just going to get by updating your version numbers. So there is that. There is a new color contrast part of our color gradient component. So if you haven't seen our color gradient component, it's basically just a way, it's kind of a souped up color picker, right? You get to do a lot of things. So it's like a color picker for power users, more or less. And what's new with this release is if you provide the color gradient a background color property. So in this case, like this demo is giving you a way of choosing a background color, and then the main color gradient is showing you what is the contrast between the background color that the user selected here and what they're currently working on right now. And it'll tell you whether you fail these AA and AAA, which are some fairly common accessibility guidelines. So right now it's yelling at me because it's saying that it doesn't like my teal on bright red. Apparently that does not pass. So if you want to yell,
that can't be right. Those
I
two
know.
are perfect.
Teal and dark red, like, I mean, that just seems like a natural color scheme, right? Like, I don't know what's wrong with that. But if you need to, like, I think if you have any apps where users need to select colors and you want to make sure, like, especially if you're building some sort of like design tool and you want to let your users know whether they're making good choices for the color selection, the color gradient can now help you do that. So kind of nice. The input character count, I'll just briefly mention this. There's a new demo on our inputs package. So you can find it on inputs, input character counter, and it'll just show you quick count if you have to, if you're collecting some sort of data that just has a character limit. There's a little demo here. It's pretty simple. It's like 10 lines of code that'll show you how to implement that. So we'll check that off our list. And to sort of wrap up, there's some final updates to the Gantt component. And I'll just give a very brief demonstration of this. So Acme has a Gantt component as well. One of the new things is there's now a year view. So you can import Gantt year view. If you're building Gantt components and you need your task go on for a long period of time, essentially you can set this to a year. You get a long stretch of time for the view. And the other thing is you can now control which text appears in these headers. And I won't show the full thing, but essentially you just go in here and actually I'll find the prop name for you though. You just say header cell and you can return like something like this, right? And I might have typoed it wrong, but yeah, there we go. Amazing production quality app right there. You have control over setting this. If you need to, the default's just going to show the title, but if you need to configure that, you can do it. And you can check those things out on the documentation, and I'll actually show you where you can find, if you want to just see this markdown file, if you just like having all of these links handy, one thing you can do is go in this direction and go to my sample app. I've got that checklist in there. I've got all the code that I showed here today. So if you want to run my sample app itself, if you want to like copy and paste chunks from that, that's something that you can do. If you have any questions, feel free to ask through the GoToWebinar client because we have people online. I'll also be taking a look here in a second at those. But if you don't get to it, or maybe you're watching the recording, hi YouTube, you can always ask through KendoUI as well. And the last thing I'm going to mention, then I'm going to turn it back over to Carl, is one more time, if you do like React, if you find any of this interesting, just as a reminder, I'm doing an all-day event on June 2nd for React Wednesdays with some pretty cool guests. So if you like this sort of content, you like chatting about React stuff, you might want to sign up and hang out there. But hopefully you enjoyed that, learned a little bit about React. But I think that's all I've got, guys.
Ooh, yeah, you managed to cover quite a lot. That's impressive. Very impressive.
A lot of new features. It's a good problem to have, right?
Yeah. Oh yeah.
We ship too much stuff that we have to struggle to get through it.
All right, so I'm going to take over now, and I'm going to chat a little bit about jQuery and Vue actually. But Alyssa and TJ, your sample applications are great, and I'm going to go through the demos, and now I feel like I didn't deliver enough for this webinar. That's me.
Whatever. You're the one who's over here with like this like really detailed knowledge of all the products. So I'm like, man, I gotta up my game.
One of these days I'll be able to match your skill here. But let's kick things off and talk a little bit about jQuery. So in KendoUI for jQuery, we have quite a lot of new components and new features. So we have a new TaskBoard component, an ActionSheet component, skeleton, which we've already seen if you've joined us for the entire session so far, the CircularGauge as well, and then the grid, TreeList, scheduler, map, QR code, editor, PDF library, and drawer components all got new updates. So what I'm going to do here is I'm going to just quickly go through with some slides for everything, and then jump into the demo so you can take a look at that. But the TaskBoard component is kind of what the name gives away, a task board. We didn't want to call it the Kanban component or something similar because in a way that limits, it's not just for Kanban, right? There are other things you can do. But this component is essentially set up of multiple columns, so you can define however many you want, and users can dynamically add them, that contain cards. And what these cards look like and how they're formatted is also completely customizable. But it gives you this interface where you can now drag items between these columns, right? So if you want to do a to-do column into done, if you want to do backlog, staging, or however you want to structure your task, it's now available to you. all in a single component. And what's nice is that it also comes with things like built-in filtering through search. You can also, of course, edit the content underneath here. There's a lot built into this component already in V1. Now, the next component is the ActionSheet component. So the ActionSheet, you're probably familiar with this from a lot of mobile applications, right? It provides that little thing that animates in from the bottom that allows you to perform some actions depending on what actions you want to have available to the user. So in this particular case, we have edit item, add favorites, and maybe upload new if we want to be able to add our own items, and even cancel. So this is the continued trend of us introducing additional components that probably work a little bit better on mobile devices, since the ActionSheet, while yes, it does work on desktop devices, you probably see it more on mobile devices, but we want to ensure that jQuery developers can also create PWAs and create mobile and responsive web applications on top of that to ensure that no matter what kind of action you want the user to be able to take, you can provide that in an intuitive way, and the ActionSheet definitely falls in line with that. You can completely customize, of course, the list that's available, and you can determine if you want to be able to have that cancel functionality built in, or if you want to just have the user, tap somewhere outside of the ActionSheet to have it go away. All right, the skeleton component, as we've seen so far, right, provides some elements that we can utilize in order to be able to simulate or provide placeholders for content that's going to be loaded later. So this is a great example that it's being animated here, where on the left-hand side, we have what could be loaded as the placeholder, while the right-hand side is the end result. And if you're loading data and it's either on a mobile device, or you have a slow connection or whatever it might be, rather than having one big loading indicator for the entire page or a section, which can provide a lot of scroll bar jumping and things can look a little bit janky, this allows you to, even if no content is loaded on the page and everything is represented by a skeleton, you more or less have given the user an indication of what is going to be loaded before it actually is loaded. This might not actually improve performance, but it definitely improves perceived performance. And I think it's something like 1.5 seconds we have to grab the user's attention before they close out an app, even if it's a web app or whatever it might be. As much as we like to think the users have sympathy for how long something might take to load, that's not always the case. So this is a great tool to have in your pocket if you're just trying to, either improve performance in some way, or maybe improve retention across your application and provide some modern and fairly, I would say, recent-ish UX improvements you can do within your application. The CircularGauge, as we've talked about, it's hard to say what this is without just repeating the name, but it is a gauge that now is a full circle. So previously we've had the linear gauge, right, a line, and the arc gauge, which you can customize to be able to have quite a lot of arc to it. It can be, a half circle, quarter circle, whatever it might be. But this component, we wanted to introduce that for the sole purpose of being a completely 360-degree gauge you can utilize. Now, the value by default ranges from 0 to 100, but you can really make this whatever you like to. In fact, here we see that we go up to 120, and then I think if we go up all the way to 0, that becomes 140, I think is where we end up, right? If I'm doing math right. So you can completely customize this, and as we can see, it can dynamically update and then have animations that occur with it. TJ showed that you can actually define ranges as well within the configuration in order to be able to determine what color the gauge should be depending on the value as well. And this particular GIF is just tied in with the slider to be able to show you that dynamicness and how that can be set up. If we move on to the grid enhancements, a couple of things that we did here. One is that we introduced a new way to be able to export to Excel when dealing with some odd selections within the grid. And when I say odd selections, what we see here, for example, is multiple rows that have been selected, but they're not necessarily connected. And you want to be able to either export this to Excel or maybe even take this data and export it to a chart. Well, we made that a little bit easier for you to do and a built-in functionality within the component. This also actually has some same defaults for when you want to select random cells throughout. So if you select 1 in ship country, 2 in freight, and maybe something in ship city further down, we actually have some built-in functionality now that tries to guess the best way to represent that data as it's being exported. So that gives some flexibility for users to not necessarily have to select an entire row in order to be able to export the selection.
The copy in there is nice too.
Yeah,
Just
so you
being
can
able to
copy it with
copy and
headers.
copy with the headers.
Yep,
Yeah.
yep. There's a lot of good functionality that you can get out of this, and this just shows off how you can do that with the chart, right? So because we've selected everything in multiple rows with all the data available, it's a little bit easier to lay out on a chart, but that's just available now out of the box with some quick configuration options, which is pretty neat. Now the tree list also got some updates. So the tree list, you probably see this fairly familiar when we were just looking at the grid, right? But the tree list and the grid, they share a lot of common DNA. The tree list is just specifically for when you have homogeneous or the same data structure throughout, but you want it to be hierarchical. So all your data, for example, is always going to have first name, last name, position, and extension. Where the grid, when you do a hierarchical grid, you might want to have a separate data set as the child item, for example, or maybe something to completely custom there. But the tree list, then all the columns will align. So as you can see on the left-hand side, as we continue to expand, everything is still aligned within the first name column. Well, with this update that we just added with R2 2021, we added the ability to have this filter row at the top. That is something that you're familiar with in the grid, but this is just a permanent row that's always going to be displayed at the top that allows you to filter or unfilter a particular data field, and you can even customize what you want to be able to be displayed. So we have a drop down that's currently being displayed. The left hand side might just be a regular input for first name. Position is a drop down, so you have, and then extension is a number, so you have the numeric text box. You have full control over what you want to be able to display there as well. The next feature, and I think for any TreeList user out there, that this might be your favorite feature of the release, we now have the ability for you to provide a full template for the entire row within the tree list. As you can imagine, this can be a little bit tricky when we think about the fact that, well, a tree list needs to have the expand collapse functionality, and it might not be as easy as just saying, well, I want this to have a custom template. However, we figured out a way to do this. We have some very smart engineers, so now you have the ability to template an entire row and still have it align with the columns and still have it align as you expand and collapse items. This actually is taken to the extent that you could, even if you wanted to, have rows where you do not have an expand and collapse icon. However, that makes things a little bit tricky in terms of how you want to introduce that functionality. But you don't have to work with the default expand and collapse arrows, for example. You can create something completely custom. Maybe it's a button, maybe it's something else that allows you to do this as a part of utilizing this template. So it's super flexible, but it is one of those things of, with great power comes great responsibility. So make sure that you take a look at how to include the ability to expand and collapse so you don't accidentally lose that. All right, the scheduler also got a ton of updates. And the first one is the ability to do hierarchical grouping. So we can see here that we have the meeting room 101 and then Alex. And these are now multiple groups within each other. So we can see that for meeting room 101, we can take a look at Alex and we can see what they have booked throughout June of 2020. And if we scroll down a little bit, we might be able to see Bob, we might be able to see Sarah as well under meeting room 101. And then maybe meeting room 201, we can start seeing the same people again and see what they booked throughout those meeting rooms. So if you're not necessarily into organizing your data this way, it's absolutely fine, but we just wanted the ability to allow for multiple hierarchical groups to occur within the scheduler for those folks that have some more advanced scheduling needs. Now, we also have the ability to tweak in how we show 24-hour events, and this is actually going to be a little bit better through the demo. But for those of you familiar with the jQuery scheduler, if you do have an event that starts on one day and ends on the next day, generally we reserve what we call the all-day event slot, which you can see up here at the top, right, where we have seminar and Alex's birthday as all-day events. Which then, for depending on your requirements, might be a little bit awkward because if you look down, sure, seminar is an all-day event, but oh, look at that, I'm open from 8 to 12 and on, even though you might not necessarily be. So with this release, we also introduced a slightly different way of being able to represent calendar events. So now if you start at 8 a.m. and go to the next day, you'll actually see the entire event go from top to bottom and then start on the next day and go down as well to kind of just make that a little bit more intuitive for what you see. You can still define an all-day event and have that up here, by the way. So we allow you to mix and match in order to ensure that you have the best natural fit for what your requirements call for. And we also introduced a year view, and this is something that a lot of folks have been looking for. So we can see with the year view for 2021, we have a couple of months displayed, and if you continue to scroll down, you'll be able to see, of course, the entire year. And each day that has something scheduled on it, you'll see this little dot that appears on that particular day, and when you hover over it, this little popover appears that allows you to get a quick look at the day, and then also, of course, what specific meetings you have on there. And then you can drill down and look into the specific day as well, of course, to see a little bit more clarity. But this is just a great way to get a snapshot over how busy your year is looking, or if the next couple of months you're trying to book a trip, vacation, whatever it might be. Maybe you got a dose of that vaccine and you're ready to leave your house for the first time in a year and a half. Then this is the perfect opportunity to be able to check out when you have the availability to do so. All right, map improvements. I don't have a great demo for this. What I'm going to just say here is that with R2 2021, we added Azure map support within the KendoUI map component because Bing Maps, RIP, is now getting deprecated in favor of Azure Maps. So the reason that I can't show this off is that if we were to have a full running demo, you can very easily grab our API key. And then, of course, as much as we trust everybody here, unfortunately, we would probably rack up our Azure bills pretty high if we were to host this publicly, because I would probably copy and paste that into my fair share of applications and forget that I need to update the actual key that I'm using. So either way, if you're looking to now use Azure Maps as a part of your KendoUI mapping, you can easily do so. And we have a knowledge base article that shows how you can approach that.
Are they doing this just because Azure is like a better brand for them at this point? Like, did the actual service change, or?
So there are some updates that they have done to the service, but I do believe it is kind of a little bit of a branding thing, and putting things that are on the cloud under the Azure brand as opposed to a thing which is more around search.
I guess calling them Bing Maps never. I guess they probably just called it Bing Maps because that's what Google did, but it doesn't really make any. Well, I guess you could search on maps. I don't know. Yeah.
I'm not one to say specifically why. I just know that if something gets deprecated, we want to make sure, of course, that we can add in what is replacing it. So that's where Azure Maps comes in. And now we just need to remember the word Azure, which I think a lot of people know. All right, the QR code component also got some updates. So we have the Swiss QR code, which is a very popular format for dealing with invoices. And if you're doing any business within Switzerland or with Switzerland or anything in the European Union, chances are you have to take advantage of this QR code. So we went through and we added that into the component, and that's just a part of the configuration option to determine that you want to be able to have that kind of QR code. The thing that is the quickest way to be able to spot if it's a Swiss QR code is that you have a little mini Swiss flag in the middle, as this image is giving away, right? And that actually leads into the next feature, where we have the ability for you to add a custom logo or an image in the center. So here we have the Kendoka smiling, knowing that it's in the middle of a QR code, which, by the way, I have no idea what happens if you scan this QR code. So I'm hoping our demos don't lead to anything
I'm
weird.
totally turning on the phone.
Do it.
So feel free to do it just for a brief second as we potentially break the internet and the webinar accidentally.
I think because it's got the custom thing, my phone's not picking up on it.
Okay, it might also be just the way I blew up the image, but the idea is that you can include a custom logo in there and you can still scan it. That it is still scannable. I have tried it on some other particular QR codes myself. Then if we jump into the editor, the big thing that we added into the editor with this release is the ability to drag handles when you're dealing with images. So now you don't just have to open the image, go into the properties and define height and width. You actually get these nice intuitive handles that allow you to drag and resize the image. This tries to use the built-in browser drag handles wherever possible, so we don't have to kind of override it, which should mean that depending on the browser that you're interacting with, it should be something that's very intuitive for any and all users. So it's kind of taken care of automatically out of the box for you. The PDF library received some very similar enhancements to what we chatted about in both Angular and React, where now it supports custom SVG logos or any SVG elements. So this particular invoice that I created is actually using an SVG element for our charts, which it's the donut chart, which it's already supported for some time. But that Kendoka logo up here, you can see is an SVG element, and that is now just automatically exported by just including it on the page and just clicking export the content. So some magic happening under the hood there for sure. And finally, the drawer also has the ability to have hierarchical items. So we can see here that we can now expand and collapse the drawer items. And if there are any additional items under one of these drawer items, we have the getting started and overview, have a clear caret that indicates that there's additional items under it, while most popular components does not have any child items, so then it won't have that logo displayed. Now, looking at the time, I don't have too much time actually, because I do need to jump into Vue, but what I wanted to showcase as I jump over into the demos is that just under demos.telerik.com/KendoUI, or if you go to demos.telerik.com, you can find all the demos that I just chatted about. So what's really easy, and I know that Alyssa and TJ both have kind of alluded to this as well, but when you jump into this, it's a big list, right? Angular hit 100 components. jQuery has even more than that, since it has been around since the early days of jQuery. So we've created quite a lot of components. But you can see anything that's new has the new tag associated with it. Anything that goes updated has the updated tag associated with it, right? So this is an easy way for you to be able to dive in and see what's new in the latest and greatest here. But because I'm running out of time, I'm just gonna show some of the new cool stuff, just very high level. We can see here with the TaskBoard component, I have to do, in progress, and done. I can go in and I can actually just quickly edit. So this is just Carl's, oh, if I could actually spell my own name. Carl's to-do app, boom, there we go. Carl's to-do app, this is what I need to do. And now I can jump in and just drag some items around. Look at how productive I am just during this webinar. I'm just getting so many things done, crushing my day today. I do still need to send the newsletter though, but that'll come later. But this happens to be something where, you know, we have to do, in progress, and done. You can define any number of columns that you like to see. When I click add column, it gets added. I can say whoopsie doopsie, I didn't actually mean to, and delete it, and delete the column. It has some built-in functionality around creating some scroll bars from left to right as well. I am zoomed in right now, so that can make it a little bit tricky. It works with remote and local data, so there's a ton of flexibility built into the component. You know, it's not a full-blown replacement for services out there that do this kind of thing, right? Like if we think about Trello, for example, there's a lot of functionality built in under the hood. You would still be responsible for something like that. However, we try to make it as easy as possible to at least provide the user experience on top of it, and then whatever else that you need to do under the hood to save this data or execute commands or actions based on how users are interacting with this, you have full control over that, of course. And everything is completely templated, so we can see that we can template the headers of each column. If we, in this particular case, are actually static, we can then also add in custom templates for each of the items, and in this case we added a tooltip on top of them. So there's just so much flexibility built in here, and of course it even comes with keyboard navigation, so you can navigate through it completely with the keyboard. The one thing that I should note, the only demo that, or the thing that I brought up, I should say that isn't a demo, is the Azure Maps specific implementation, but we actually have a quick knowledge-based article on this. So you can jump into docs.telerik.com/KendoUI. Easiest thing, honestly, is just to search for Azure. It'll be the first thing that you find. But the quick thing, and you can see here, right, is in the URL template, you just have to define essentially using the API, right, of Azure Maps. And you can see that here, your key here is the tricky part here. As a part of the string, you can just toss it in here if you have an Azure Maps key, and you will be off to the races. This demo will send to you right around Austin, Texas, and drop a pin right in the middle of Austin, Texas. So that's where these locations are. So Yeah, that is what I had for jQuery. Like I said, I recommend checking out the demos to ensure that you can take a look at what the code looks like for this, right? But there's a lot of cool functionality baked into the components now. But let's go ahead and jump back into presenting. And thank you, PowerPoint, for always reverting the setting in terms of what to display and when. But hopefully everybody can see my main screen now. So let's talk about KendoUI for Vue. Let's for all you Vue developers out there, let's see what's going on in the Vue world. And something to keep in mind with KendoUI for Vue is that it is our youngest library. And what we have done is that we initially wrapped our jQuery components to offer kind of a stopgap for those of you jumping on the Vue train, and you want to be able to continue to use your KendoUI for KendoUI components, I should say. But on top of that, we're also building out native components for Vue and replacing them with the wrap components slowly but surely. So the great thing about this is that we share rendering across all the KendoUI instances. So if you, for example, were using the wrapped button component for Vue up until now, when you replace it with the native component, if you've done any updates to our styling, our theming, or anything like that, they will persist for the new native component as well. So that makes it easy to swap out on a component by component basis as you need it. But with R2, we added the button group, the floating action button, the ChipList upload, and some grid improvements as well. So these are pretty quick to go through because the button is just like you think of, right? We have a button that's available in KendoUI, which can be a basic button. It can be a style button. It can include icons and text as a mix. It can just be an icon if you like it to, right? It's fairly flexible. And then if we jump into the button group, it kind of extends on top of that and just provides a way to group multiple buttons together. So this is probably the most common thing that you interact with maybe on a daily basis that is actually a button group where you have bold, italic, and underline. And this all kind of relates to how you want to be able to modify text, right, in the look and feel of the text. And you can control things like have everything be toggleable and selectable. You can have it so, okay, I only want to one of these options, so you don't go overboard with bolding, italicizing, and underlining something that you deem is very, very important. So you have full control over that. So the button group is just there to help manage groups of buttons, which I guess the name kind of gives away. The floating action button is a lot of fun because we see this across a lot of desktop and mobile applications alike. But the floating action button is a action button, so that means that it's doing a primary action when users interact with it. And in this particular sample that I'm showing here in this GIF, we're actually using the speed dial functionality that allows you to have an item of a list item pop up on top of the floating action button with additional action items. So in this particular case, it might be, hey, I'm going to share this with my 3 closest friends. But this could also be something like when you want to add an item into the grid, you might want to have a floating action button instead. And maybe you want to be able to do some custom things like add maybe have 3 different types of data items that you ultimately want to add in, or maybe there's some additional actions that you want to do on the grid. Either way, it is all possible to do with the floating action button, so it can be a single action or multiple actions through the speed dial. The chip, as the name kind of gives away, is a way to be able to display content and something in a chip format or a pill format. I've also seen it appear as. What we see here is the built-in styles that we have within the chip component. So you have full customization on whether you want to be able to display the little X here, if you want an icon in the beginning, if you want text. You can also control the look and feel and the theming through CSS. But we also have out of the box, I should say, as styles that you can use. So in this case, it's success, info, error, warning, and more that just automatically pick up some intuitive colors for that, regardless of the KendoUI theme that you're using, or any maybe even additional CSS customizations that you might want to do on a basic item. You can now just say, oh, for success, just make this green automatically. And you can, of course, even transition between them if you like to. The ChipList, similarly, allows you to be able to take the chip that we had before and now manage a list of chips. So a chip by itself can, of course, be useful if you just want to maybe have it in a grid cell as a unique way to be able to display some information and maybe some labels or tags. But what if you have a list of chips you want to be able to select from, and maybe you want to be able to select just one item, maybe you want to select multiple, maybe you want the user to be able to add and remove chips and be able to do that through that little X that we saw. Well, the chip list allows you to manage any collection of chips in order to ensure that you know which items are selected, which items are available, and also help manage the ability to add and remove items from the list pretty easily. The upload component allows you to upload files into your Vue applications, and upload is sneakily one of the more popular components that we have across any one of the KendoUI suites, because uploading something to a server is A, something that a lot of applications want to do, and B, tends to be a little bit harder than you think. At first you say, oh, how hard can it be, especially now that we have the file API, right, from HTML5. Well, it can be a little bit tricky. So we tried to reduce that complexity by just allowing you to simply hook up this component into your application and maybe just provide some URLs or some endpoints that you're going to send the file to. And that's really it. Makes the configuration nice and easy, and we take care of a lot of the complexities for you under the hood. And finally, with the grid, and this is going to be hard to show in this GIF that I have here, we have infinite scrolling, and that allows you to scroll all the way down to a list of items that have additional items loading. In this particular case, we just reset the GIF. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to jump into the demos instead, and we can take a look at what that looks like. I almost said in real life, as if what I just showed you wasn't real life.
Let's return to reality so that you can see.
Exactly, yeah, out of the matrix and into the real world. So in the Vue demos under the grid, we see here that we have scroll modes, and if you scroll down a little bit on that page, we have infinite scrolling. So we can see that we have a scroll bar that is, roughly, I gotta use my thumb. If I'm from here, it's about an inch. I'm terrible with imperial measurements. I only really know metric. But I'm going to scroll down to the bottom, and then we'll see that the scroll bar jumps up a little bit, but that's because we added more data. So now we'll see that I scroll down, we see that it now says that I have 40 items that I'm showing, 50, 60, and we can see the scroll bar getting shorter and shorter. So this is what we mean by infinite scrolling, is that instead of virtualization, where we have all the data loaded at once, you see the full scroll bar and you want to scroll up and down. This allows you to continue to load data as the user hits the bottom of the available scroll area, and then load data at that point. So it's a little bit of a different story, because once this is loaded, it's actually all going to be available. There's no virtualization at that point. So if you have a million rows, this might not necessarily be the most intuitive way for users to scroll through your data. But for smaller data sets, this can be very powerful, because it just is another intuitive way to be able to scroll through some content. Some popular implementations of infinite scrolling, actually they got rid of this eventually, but eBay, you used to be able to scroll kind of ad infinitum, like down and constantly just load more data. I saw that they actually changed that due to some user behavior experiments that they were doing. But ultimately, that's kind of the idea, right? That, okay, well, yeah, you hit the bottom, but actually there's more, right? And then you can continue to kind of scroll down, and it's another way to do paging, really, is what's happening. Because under the hood, when the scroll event happens, we can dive into this. All that we're doing is pulling in more data. This happens to just use some local data, but you can see that it can become pretty powerful if you're loading from a remote data service and only loading data as is needed, as opposed to going through and just loading all at once, for example. But similar to what we chatted about within the jQuery demos, if you go to demos.telerik.com, you'll be able to find the Vue demos, or if you go to the main Vue page, there's the demos portion up here, and you'll be able to see a list of all the new components as well as the updated components. We did manage also, by the way, to squeeze in, and this is something I wanted to leave as a little bit of a surprise here, the Excel exportation library that we have across jQuery, Angular, React. We now also introduced in Vue. So this is pretty interesting, because As we see here, we have just the save Excel method in action, it says, and we hit export Excel. But what are we exporting, right? We don't have anything here. It's just an empty button. Well, everybody.
The suspense is killing me, Carl.
Exactly, and it's loading on my other screen, I think. So we'll have to see what happens here. But we see now, and when I pop this over, we have a full Excel file that's completely populated with data that got generated from a single button click. So the magic behind this is actually that this is a completely client-side library that allows you to create Excel files on the fly. So in a lot of our samples, you see this tied in with a grid, and it might seem like, oh, well, the grid has a lot of data, so we have Excel exportation built into the grid, and that's it. But it's actually a library that you can use to create anything from the ground up. If we take a look here, right, you of course want to take a look at the API, but we're providing things like a file name, columns. We can even go a little bit further into and provide children into those columns if we'd like to. We even have the ability here for group header. We have a custom group header where you can completely define what you want the style and the look and feel and the text of these cells to be, so that when you're exporting, you're not only taking a look at, for example, in this case, we're passing in a JSON file worth of data. You can also completely customize that JSON data and then have it actually have styles beyond just, oh, here's a couple of columns and rows. So it's a super powerful library. We definitely could spend essentially the entire webinar just diving through this because it also applies to all the KendoUI flavors, but that's now available to Vue users as well, just out of the box, which is a lot of fun. But all right, I think if I'm looking at the time, we have about 4 minutes or so left. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to just jump back into the slides, swap the displays again. Thank you, PowerPoint. I'm going to just mention that everything that we've covered today, which I know has been quite a whirlwind of just a ton of content available in jQuery, Angular, React, and Vue. But everything we covered today, you can find at telerik.com/KendoUI. And from there, you can navigate to the docs and demos to make it easy to find those. You can also find the What's New page. You can find the roadmap pages if you're interested in what's coming out with our next release, R3 2021, and links to the recording here and everything like that. It's kind of the main hub of being able to navigate to and find absolutely everything that we talked about here today. Also, as Alyssa mentioned, we have blogged about everything that's new for this release. So if you're interested in just, instead of listening to our voices going through what's new and reading about it or finding links, if you go to telerik.com/blogs, you'll be able to find individual what's new blog posts for each one of the KendoUI flavors. And if you're interested in the other Telerik products, you'll be able to find blog posts on those as well. So I did have a last final slide here. This is Q&A. I don't know if we'll be able to actually have time to cover any questions live. However, I was paying attention to the chat as we were going through all the different sections. And as I mentioned, we had a ton of people actually from our support team and from our engineering team helping out, answering questions in the background. So hopefully any and all of your questions were answered there. But I do want to do a special shout out for those people. We brought a small army here to ensure that we could cover any questions that appeared during the webinar. So hopefully your questions were answered.
And I did want to mention we had some shout outs on Twitter as well. So we'll be addressing your questions. We'll reply as soon as we're off. So
yeah, definitely. I was trying to pay attention a little bit to Twitter on my phone as we were going through here, but I got lost in the weeds a little bit and didn't want to keep on looking down and be rude to the great content that you two were presenting. So anyways, yes, we'll be able to hit up everybody and of course make sure that we can get your questions answered. But thank you so much for joining us today. And either you might be seeing this recorded video, so in that case, join us on Twitter at KendoUI, and we saw all the Twitter handles of everybody here as well, so you can reach out to us directly. But yeah, I think that's where we're going to end it today, everybody. So thank you very much again for joining us and enjoy the rest of your day.
Yeah, thanks everybody.
Bye, everybody.